All right, let's get started with Tanya for the 24th of ER, May 11th. We're doing Monday's portion of Tanya, which is in middle of chapter 51. So actually, because we have a little extra time, I'm going to go back to yesterday's Tanya because it's smack in the middle. It's smack in the middle of a very important chapter. A very, I think, understandable, but a very important one about the Shechina. Alan, this is the chapter that really delves into the Shechina, the way God manifests in the world. So for those of us that like the Shechina, this is a must read. So we're going back to page 66. We're going to do yesterday's Tanya, page Perek Aleph, the chapter 51. Okay? So just understand why the Tanya. Tanya, I didn't know this till I was older. Tanya is one of the most structured Hebrew books ever. It's incredibly well structured. So the title page of Tanya, if you remember, was, this book is based on one verse in the Torah, and that is, Ki karov elecha hadavar ma'od beficha b'vavcha la'asosei. This thing of the Torah is very near to you. Thank you. In your mouth and in your heart that you may do it. So the Tanya tells you how living with God's mitzvahs in your mind, heart, mouth, action
Amen.
is very doable 24/7.
Amen.
And he did that. He talked about in the first 34 chapters how it's possible. It's, the animal soul, the godly soul over the animal soul, all that. And in chapter 35, the Alter Rebbe got a little existential with us. Like, I told you how to do it, but why is it so hard? Right? It's very interesting. You read a lot of books. I don't read that many books, but
you read a lot.
Secular. I don't read that many, secular books. But
Good.
I'm reading a book on marketing now, and a lot of them are how-tos, right? And sometimes they touch a little bit on the why. So the first 34 chapters of Tanya is really the how-to. Like, how do you do the war? How do you do the battle of animal soul, godly soul, animal soul? But then he takes a step back and thinks, why is it so hard? Why does God make it so hard? Like, okay, you could win this hard battle every day, but why does God set us up for this constant, wearisome battle? So to answer that, he had to explain, it's actually by design, because God needs you to transform the lowest realms, which is your animal soul and the physical body and the physical world. So God has to put you in this low realm to battle every day, because that's what transforms the world.
Amen.
And then to explain that a little bit, how important the transformation of the lower, of the body, of the lower realm into holiness. It gave the metaphor from the Kabbalah about a Jew should not walk 4 cubits bareheaded, because the Shekhinah is dwelling above his head. What does that mean? The body is the wick. The light of the divine presence is the Shekhinah. It can shine on your body. But to do that, you need oil, which is the good deeds. That keeps it tethered, the Shekhinah flame, the flame of the Shekhinah, to your wick body.
Wow.
Through the medium of the fuel burning up. So now in chapter 51, he's going to explain more the concept that the Shekhinah needs oil. The Shekhinah needs oil. So he's going to explain how, more so, I guess, how the Shekhinah dwells on us when we do mitzvahs. So let's go to it. Page 66. For further explanation of the words of the Yanuka, the oracle, and the Kabbalah we mentioned above, this idea of the Shekhinah dwells on our body via the oil of the good deeds, the mitzvahs. It's necessary, meaning, the question here is, doesn't say it directly in the words, but it's basically like, this seems to be a new way of looking at it. That typically the way oil is compared to as a metaphor is wisdom, chachma. You know that?
Mm-hmm.
So, but here we're saying, no, we're saying good deeds do it. That's action. Usually oil is chachma because oil rises to the top. Wisdom is the highest part of the human faculties. So, yet when we give the metaphor of the Shechina flame on the wick, the body wick, well, how does it stay connected? We don't say through chachma. We say through action mitzvahs, which seems to deviating from the typical way we look at oil in the metaphor. In the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that's a side point. That's not a side point, but
Huge point.
It's necessary first. So we got to do what we call a prefacing. This is a big way in Chassidus. I think you see this even in Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Steinsaltz, that yes, big questions, and you have to take a step back to preface. You have to give some background information to answer the question. So we got to take a step back and first explain so that one may understand a little bit, at least a little bit, the concept of the Shechina, which means the dwelling of God, that it dwelt in the Holy of Holies. And likewise, any other place where the Shekhinah dwells. What does this mean? What does it mean the Shekhinah dwells? The Shekhinah is God, is a manifestation of God, right? God's everywhere. So what does it mean God's more in this place, in the Holy of Holies, than he's in Las Vegas? What's the difference? God's everywhere. God has to manifest to be in Las Vegas. God has to manifest to be Lahavdil in the Holy of Holies. We say the whole world's full of his glory. Is not no place empty of him. So what does it mean the Shekhinah is dwelling somewhere? Any takers for that question? Okay.
Maybe more.
However, to understand this big existential question of how
Stronger. You mean stronger?
This existential means like a question of existence.
No. I meant the Shekhinah.
How the Shekhinah is strong, but what is that? What does it mean? It's not
mean?
like a genie in a bottle. You can put the genie in the lamp.
The light's brighter.
Okay, maybe. We'll see. To understand that, we have to talk about, you're going to see here, and I'm going a little bit slower because we have a little bit of time, but also there's a lot of big recurring ideas here in the whole of Hasidic philosophy. There's the idea, it's written in Job, in Eov, Umibisari echsalika. For my flesh, I perceive God. Interesting, right? For my flesh, I perceive, I will view God. So this is a big idea about how Kabbalah.
Is he talking about mitzvahs?
No. This is a big mechanism in Chassidus. How they talk about a big part of Chassidus is to understand a little tiny eensy beensy wit of God, right? Despite our mortal, our finite understanding.
Mm-hmm.
One of the mechanisms, it quotes this verse, says that from my flesh I will view God. I think I'm not sure the literal thing means, but the way it's understood in Midrash and Chassidus is that God makes the body as the image, it says in the image of God. The body and the soul. The soul is also the image of God. They're both, the human being with all the human being's components is an image of God. Okay, that's so when you hear that in Sunday school, what does that, conjure up for you? Like, oh, okay, that's nice. Human beings are really good. They're really good. They're really in the image of God. But no, it actually means it's very specific. Human beings are, if you want to understand God a little bit, he gives us a tool called the human being. We can look into the human being's body and psyche. You can get a little bit of understanding of the way God works, God animates the world. Because the human being is a small world. Okay. Another point Rabbi Steinsaltz points out is this is not just a like a trick or a hack, a shortcut. Everything you understand, mathematics, whatever, literature, it's all through you. Like there's a you with a brain, and then you understand it. So the truth is, everything in the world goes through you. So he's saying that the more you can observe the you, the body and soul, it's the only way to really appreciate God. Because you can't understand something that you don't relate to. It's not within you. Anyways, moving along. I just want to point out that is a very big idea in Chassidus, Mibisari, Echsa Lokai, from my flesh I will view God. By way of analogy, so in our case, we want to use an analogy of understanding the Shekhinah. Let's talk about the human soul. Pervades all 248 organs of the body from head to foot, the highest to lowest part of the body. The soul is enmeshed, intertwined with every part of the human being. Nevertheless, meaning, for example, you can't say that the soul is more in your heart than in your toe. They're both alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the brain, one's a higher form of human ability, but they're both alive. So the soul's touching everything in the body. Nevertheless, the principal abode, both, and the Rebbe actually is an interesting point. The principal abode, the Rebbe says, meaning its revealed form of the soul.
Where are you reading, Rabbi?
Page 67. I went back to Sunday because we didn't do it yesterday and to continue it. So the principal abode of the soul, meaning the way the soul is revealed, that we can utilize it and benefit from it. And also its dwelling place, which means it's actually, it says that the all-encompassing non-revealed, I guess the subconscious or the transcendent part of the soul, both the pervasive, portal of the soul, and even the transcendent portal of the soul is the brain. It's in the brain. That's the portal. And from the brain, the soul is diffused throughout all the organs.
Why do you say there's 248 organs? I don't believe that's true.
It was a certain medical book of those days. It could be any. It's just a way of talking with the organs. It could be in the modern. You can find another way of looking at it, but just a way of saying all the organs. So one way that in other words, the soul is in the brain, the portal's in the brain, and simultaneously goes from the brain to all throughout the body. No hierarchy. The nervous system, I guess. It's like light, right? When you have the source of light, it starts shining the rays all over. So the source of light, the soul, is first entering into the brain, and from the brain, it powers up everything with the vitality. Another way of looking at this, that's one way the soul is entering into the body. The other aspect, every organ receives from the soul, let's say I'll call the organ the hardware of the person. It receives from the soul a different form of life force and functional power appropriate to it according to the organ's composition character, the software. For example, the eye is the hardware. It's a camera. The fact that it can see is because the soul has this functional power to see, the software.
Miracles.
The power of sight accords with the intricate way the eyeball is, the translucent part of the eye, whatever. So to the ear, to hear, the ability to hear is a soul power that's being manifest in the hardware of the ear. The mouth to speak, the feet to walk. Every organ can do something unique. And that uniqueness, actually, it's the perfect glove to fit the hand, meaning the software that is coming from the soul. As we clearly sense how in the brain, one is conscious of all that occurs within the 248 organs, everything experienced by them. What's interesting is that the brain must have all the software there at a more concentrated level, because proof, the brain is always aware, if it wants to be, of anything going on in any part of the body. It feels it. It feels that it would, make sure it's working.
Concentrating.
Even without concentrating, it's just automatically.
No, but the word concentrating might be a good word.
Right. The variation in receiving the functional powers and life force by the organs of the body from the soul, that each limb gets a different power, sight, hearing, etc. It's that differentiation of different powers. How come the ear doesn't get sight? How come right? There's all this. It doesn't derive from the soul's essence and being. That we could say the essence of the soul is complex of 248 parts. That can't be. Which the soul is divvied up to 248 locations, all parts of the limbs, according to the design of the various locations of the body's organs. You can't say that, because according to this, would follow the next page, the soul's essence and being is designed in a physical design, a likeness and structure similar to the structure of the body, God forbid. The soul is spiritual. It's not a ghost. It's not an apparition. So how could it have any, how could it have, I guess, in its level, things that correspond to body? Rather, so how does it work? The soul, the essence of the soul, is a single spiritual entity. It's a single and spiritual entity. So its oneness is plain and uncompounded. There's no parts in the soul. It's one essence. And as a spiritual entity, it's divested from any physical design of any type of definition of physical space, measure, limitation.
Wow.
The soul is free of any type of dimension of space and time.
Wow.
By virtue of its intrinsic being and essence. Meaning, that's why the soul can never be, the essence of the soul can never be affected by the body's actions, because it's not the same language. It doesn't correspond to it. It's a different type of oneness of the person. But then you have a big question. And it's not valid to say that the soul's essence, that it's in the brain of the head more than in the feet, since its being and essence is not subject to the constant dimension of physical space limitation. Since most of Atzmusa is not in the Geder, not in the space limitation, yeah. Okay, so therefore, the essence of the soul is not in any part of the body more than the other. It doesn't have parts. It doesn't have a relationship to parts. So it has to be equally in the toenail and in the brain, even though they're higher and lower organs. But the essence of the soul doesn't have higher or lower. It just is. It's just life. But then you have a big question. Okay, then how does it work? How do you jump from essence that has no parts to then that it gives life to lots of parts? Rather, 613 kinds of functional powers and vital forces are included within the soul, within its being and essence, to become actualized, to emerge from this concealment. Meaning like this. There could be no parts in the essence of the soul, but it has all the potentials for those software of seeing and hearing and doing. But they're not differentiated from the essence. They don't have their own space. So inside the essence of the soul, there is potential for all types of the powers, the power of the soul, the body, to come out and actually, but it's in potentia. And that potentia is in order to animate the 248 organs and 365 blood vessels of the body through becoming enclosed within the animals, the animating or vital soul, which also possesses corresponding 248, 365 powers and vital forces. So the animal soul, or we call the vital soul, biological soul, that is in a lower, it's a midpoint, it's a bridge to the essence of the soul, life, without functions, just life, pure life, and the body, which is just functions. The midpoint is the animal soul, or the vital soul, that on one hand it's spiritual, but it does have parts. Okay, he goes in further today. This is now Monday. Now, concerning the flow of all 613 kinds of functional powers and vital forces from the concealment of the soul, where they're hidden, and now they're being drawn into the body to animate it. Concerning this flow, the sages have said that the Mishkana V'Hashrasa, the principal dwelling place and transcendent revelation, is entirely in the brains of the head. What does it mean? That the brain So in the way, in the essence of the soul, there's potential for all types of functions, but it's not. It's very. It's, because in potentia, there's no division there. There's no delineation. But in the body, it does give the organs life. So what happens in between? That the first manifestation, I guess, from the vital soul, which has already is now converting it into functional tools. It is first into start being revealed, playing out in the body, is in the brain. Therefore, it is they, the brains, which first receive the power and life force appropriate to them, according to their composition and character, namely the chabad, the intellectual faculties, the faculty of thought, and whatever pertains to the brain. So the first entry of the soul is first it goes to the brain. So it's basically a ton of the soul's intelligence and its abilities to think and feel and see. It first goes into the brain, and therefore the brain, the primary, part that makes everything function is the brain. The brain has to gets all the software from the soul, really from the vital soul, I think at this point, because it has to be already delineated. And it goes to the brain. So the brain, first of all.
The brain is the firmware, not the software.
Firmware. Okay, maybe the firmware. And not only this, the brains receive their own life force. So again, the brains get their own, the first powering up of the human is the brain's supercomputer, the firmware, right? And it also gets the overall flow of all the other streams of vitality that's going to go to the other organs, the sight, the ability to see, to hear, to do. And clothing the brains of the head. But also the overflow of all the other streams of vitality to the organs is also included in clothing the brains of the head before it goes to the individual organs. So sight and hear is all there in the brain. And from there, the brain, radiance is the thing. Glimmers of that energy flows to all the other organs, each of them receiving the functional power and vital force appropriate to its character. Power of sight in the eye, the power of hearing in the ear. But all the functional powers flow from the brain, as is known, for there in the brain is located the principal dwelling place of the entire soul in a revealed form. Since there in the brain, the overall life force the overall life force which flows from the soul is revealed. It is only the individual faculties of the overall life force which shine forth and radiate from the brain to all other organs, just as light radiates and shines from the sun into the innermost of rooms. And even the heart, which is the essential organ, it also gets its vital force from the brain, which is why the brain naturally dominates the heart, as explained above. So that ends today. It's just to summarize how I understand it, at least. So everything, the soul is first being manifest. The way I have to really double check this, but the main point is that the soul is in the visible essence of life. It can't do it. It can't power up a body. It's too lofty, too ethereal. Okay. Then what it does is and everything has the potential for all types of human functions, but it doesn't have but it's not, there's no actual software there. And then it goes into it goes to this converter called the vital soul, the animal soul. The converter that is that it's a spiritual drive, but it's more relatable to physicality. So it has divisions in that spiritual drive, which I don't really get. I have to look into that. Then once it's there, okay, now it's ready to go into a physical being. So it goes into the brain. The brain is where the firmware, the centralized firmware, the centralized software that was created in the vital soul is in the brain first, and therefore the brain has primacy over everything else, because everything it has, whatever the body can do elsewhere, is always is being revealed in the brain first. Okay.